Welcome to session 9 of chapter 2 of Old Testament history, the fate of Sodom and Gomorrah. The Bible is rich in information and life lessons, but there is so much more. I could easily teach twice as much as I have so far, but we've got to finish sometime, so I'm cherry picking from the passages, and we'll leave the rest so we can move along. We are now starting to move out of the foggy, distant past into recorded ancient history, for which there are an increasing number of extra biblical sources. The Bible contains an intact chronology that goes all the way back to Adam. In fact, it has a longer and more complete chronology than any other ancient record. But because it is thought to be a religious book, it's viewed with suspicion by academics. So, just like Arnold spoke of the Holy Grail being if we could discover something that combines biblical accounts with true science, there's a similar goal of matching up biblical history with secular history. Alas, many archaeologists and historians do not seem to want to corroborate the Bible. They contend that the Bible is full of myths. But bit by bit, as new archaeological discoveries are being made, more and more corroborating information is being found, such as city names heretofore only known in the Bible, or, for example, a cuneiform cylinder from a tell in Iraq, which had languished in a British museum storeroom for 75 years, was discovered to bear the name of the local ruler, Ur-Nammu. That documented the mound of ruins from which it was excavated as Ur of the Chaldees. Or when Jericho was excavated and the walls were discovered to have fallen from an earthquake immediately followed by a fire and then uninhabited for hundreds of years, like the Bible said. Or clay tablets in the archives of the capital cities of the ancient world, mentioning details of interactions with Israel which match the Bible accounts. More and more details being dug out of the fog of the ancient past are fitting with what the Bible records. But, as I've said before, sometimes the sciences, which we expect to act like sciences, instead behave like the religions they criticize. For they too seem to have sacred dogma that cannot be questioned. Consequently, over and over for centuries, when anyone pointed out anomalies, they often were hushed. And then changes and advances often were hard fought. When many think of archaeology, they fancy the discoveries of Pompeii and King Tut's tomb, the Rosetta Stone, the Dead Sea Scrolls, or even Indiana Jones movies. Those certainly were important finds or exciting entertainment. But the bulk of archaeology activity is mundane, digging in dirt and sifting the remains under a hot sun. The layers of debris and artifacts are documented and interpreted and then attempted to be fit into a chronology of what era they're from. Now, there can be no argument that there are distinct layers of debris at archaeological sites, and those are marked by identifiable traits, such as changes in pottery styles or markings, or the scarab charms, etc., that they may contain. But the challenge is assigning dates to each layer. There are 3 books which I recommend for those who want to study the Old Testament and get started. These are The Bible as History by Werner Keller, The Exodus Problem by Donovan Corville, and The Mysterious Numbers of the Hebrew Kings by Edwin R. Thiele, Thiele. They will give you a good idea of the challenges of believing the Bible amongst skeptics, especially Corville's book, which is viewed as archaeological heresy by many, for he abandoned the established dates for Israelite archaeology because he said they were based upon an incorrectly long chronology of neighboring Egypt. Here's a quote from Corville, page 78. He says, "In dealing with the problems related to man's past history, it has been convenient to divide the period of his existence into epochs. While man is popularly believed to have had a long period of evolutionary development, our present interest begins with the point where man is presumed to have first manifested the necessary degree of intelligence to make weapons and tools. It is not strange that these epochs were named after the materials used in making such artifacts. One thus meets such terms as the Stone Age, the Chalcolithic Age, which is referring to the combined use of stone and copper, or the Bronze Age and the Iron Age. An outline of the approximate dates popularly assigned to these various epochs he provides in a table in his book. It should be noted that for most of these periods, no one attempts to assign anything resembling exact dates, and hence there will be found variations in their use by various authors. It would seem that at the time these terms were adopted, the concept was entertained that there were more or less sharp lines of demarcation marking the changes from the use of one material to the next. Whatever may have been the situation, it is now abundantly clear that the transitions from the use of one material to the next were gradual and prolonged, and certainly not uniform in time over any extended territory. Stone was used in making weapons long after introduction of copper and continued to be used among the less civilized people into the present era. Copper weapons have been found in the area recognized as the Bronze Age, and strangely, there is little or no evidence of the use of bronze in Palestine during the 1,000-year period attributed to quote-unquote early bronze. It is thus apparent that one cannot date objects in debris layers solely by the materials used in their construction, and it is little wonder that continued attempts to do so lead to anomalies and anachronisms, unquote. Another archaeologist named Flinders Petrie, Petrie. He was kind of controversial, a pioneer in the study of archaeology. Among his other advances were advances in methodology of excavation, how to document everything. He also proposed various time periods based on the characteristics of the pottery found in the layers at archaeological digs. So they subdivided those bronze, iron ages, etc., into early bronze 1, 2, 3, and 4, middle bronze 1 and 2, late bronze 1 and 2, and then the Iron Age 1, 2, and 3. Now, again, no one can question the fact that the layers discovered in archaeological digs show a sequence. It's accepted that after areas were conquered, the societies and cultures and pottery often changed. This is what has been found. Or sometimes there was an event, like an earthquake or a fire or a flood, that caused a change. But applying date ranges to each layer is where the problem is. The layers in Palestine don't have calendars buried in with them, or coins with date stamped on them, etc. Corville contends that there is no better opportunity of coordinating the layers in Palestine with Egyptian history then the fall of Jericho. The Bible says the walls fell flat, and then the city was burned. That's exactly what archaeologists have found, except they have attributed that layer that was terminated thereby to the wrong people. They have done so because they're influenced by the accepted chronology of Egypt, which Courville says is wrong. As a consequence of this, the Canaanites have been assigned the layer that actually was left by the Israelites. And the Israelites were assigned the layer left by the less proficient people the Assyrians repopulated Israel with after they'd been carried away. Courville says this blunder has caused chaos in Israelite history. Instead of following the history of Israel documented in the Bible, it has raised questions about the validity of the Bible. That suspicion is improperly placed. It should be upon Egyptian chronology. But because anything Egyptian carries more weight after the Rosetta Stone discovery and then the sensational discovery of King Tut's tomb, many think to be fact what still is theory about the Egyptian dynasties. So, with that introduction and understanding of archaeology, we now will consider the archaeological discoveries regarding the destruction of Sodom and Gomorrah and how they compare with what the Bible says. And folks, it is stunning. Genesis 18. Please turn to Genesis 18, verse 17. The Lord said, "Shall I hide from Abraham that thing which I intend to do? Seeing that Abraham shall surely become a great and mighty nation, and all the nations of the earth shall be blessed in him. For I know him, that he will command his children and his household after him, and they shall keep the way of the Lord, to do justice and judgment, that the Lord may bring upon Abraham that which he hath spoken of him." Now, why was God concerned whether Abraham knew what was going to happen or not? The only thing I can think of is that God had promised all the land to him. So, if that was true, then Abraham was spiritually in charge of it. It's like what you are in your area, in your city. You're the believer there. You're God's representative who knows the rightly divided word. You're God's light against the darkness. We see that in the fact that Abraham rescued Lot and defeated King Chedorlaomer. I remember one time when I was in northwest Indiana that there was a crime wave of carjackings in which the thieves would bump into other cars along the road, and then when people would, by law, have to stop to inspect the damage and trade insurance company information, etc., the thieves would rob them and take their car. Wow. It had happened several times. And our new people in our fellowships were beginning to be afraid and not wanting to drive to fellowship for fear that this might happen to them. So I got angry. And I said, "This is my area. I'm spiritually in charge here. And this is not going to happen anymore. These guys are going to get caught, and it's going to stop." So I prayed and commanded it to come to pass in the name of Jesus Christ. The gang was caught the next day because a rival informed on them. That's why I think God thought he should tell Abraham what was coming. Abraham was in charge. Genesis 18, verse 20. "And the Lord said, because the cry of Sodom and Gomorrah is great, and because their sin is very grievous, I will go down now and see whether they have done altogether according to the cry of it, which has come unto me, and if not, I will know." And the men turned their faces from thence. These are the three men that had visited Abraham, that he had offered hospitality to. They are the ones who also gave the prophecy that Sarah heard. But anyway, they turned their faces from thence and went towards Sodom. But Abraham stood yet before the Lord. And Abraham drew near and said, Will you also destroy the righteous with the wicked? Perhaps there be 50 righteous within the city. Will thou also destroy and not spare the place for the 50 righteous that are therein? That be far from thee to do after this manner, to slay the righteous with the wicked, and that the righteous should be as the wicked. Be that far from thee. Shall not the judge of all the earth do right? Boy, that took guts to talk to God that way. But look what Abraham did. And the Lord said, all right, if I find in Sodom 50 righteous within the city, then I will spare all the place for their sakes. But Abraham pushed it. Verse 27, and Abraham answered and said, Behold now, I've taken upon me to speak unto the Lord. Yeah, it took a lot of guts. Which am but dust and ashes. Perhaps there shall lack 5 of the 50 that you and I agreed on. Will you destroy all the city for the lack of 5? And he said, If I find there 40 and 5, I won't destroy it. And then he spake unto him yet again and said, Perhaps there be 40 found there. And he said, All right, I won't do it for 40's sake. And then he said unto him, Oh, let not the Lord be angry, and I will speak. Peradventure there shall be 30 found there. And he said, Well, I won't do it if I find 30 there. And he said again, Behold, now I've taken upon me to speak unto the Lord. Yes, he sure did. Peradventure there shall be 20 found there. And he said, I won't destroy it for 20's sake. And then he said, Oh, let not the Lord be angry, and I will speak yet this once. Peradventure 10 be found there. And he said, I will not destroy it for 10's sake. But you know what? There weren't even 10. And the Lord went his way, and as soon as he had left, communing with Abraham, Abraham returned unto his place. Now, of course, we must understand this in the light of the Semitic idiom of permission. We also must understand this in terms of the goodness of God versus the badness of the devil. But look at the effect of a blessing that even a few believers can have over an entire area, even 10 of them. Satan is pure evil. He despises us humans. We're like stupid insects to him, like it says in Job. In his skyward sneer, he enjoys using us humans as pawns to affront God. But he has no loyalties to anyone. And when he tires with even his best people, he just crumples them up and throws them away. And we see this throughout history. Often, after major successes for God and his people, all the devil can do is have a tantrum. Like after that great turning point in Jesus' ministry with the feeding of the 5,000, all the devil could do is make the wind blow. Or after Christianity became established, he destroyed the temple in 70 AD. Well, I think this event was similar, because one must see things from a spiritual perspective. The devil had used Sodom and Gomorrah and their revolt to lure Chedorlaomer, king of the Elamites, that's from the Iran area, to lure him into Canaan with an army in hopes he'd ultimately contend with Abraham for the promised land. Tried to take it away. But that failed gloriously when Abraham defeated that army with that nighttime attack and rescued Lot. And Sodom and Gomorrah were even grateful to Abraham for that. So Sodom and Gomorrah, as evil and decadent as they were of no more use to him. So, like is his custom, he just violently crumpled them up and threw them away. Genesis 19:1. And there came two angels to Sodom at evening, and Lot sat in the gate of Sodom. And Lot, seeing them, rose up to meet them, and he bowed himself with his face toward the ground. And he said, Behold, now, my lords, turn in, I pray you, into your servant's house, and tarry all night. Wash your feet, and you shall rise up early and go on your ways. And they said, No, we're going to stay in the street all night. And he pressed upon them greatly, that's according to custom. And they turned in unto him, and entered into his house, and he made them a feast, and did bake unleavened bread, and they did eat. So, Lot, a righteous man, lived there in Sodom, and because of his qualities, he was one of the elders of the gate. I think this position may have been rewarded him in gratitude to Abraham, his uncle, for saving the people and the goods of Sodom and giving them back to the king when Abram had defeated Chedorlaomer, because it says that Lot sat in the gate. So he was a judge of civil matters and an advisor, and he offered the three strangers hospitality. Now, they had refused according to custom, but Lot insisted according to custom, and so he fed them and housed them for the night. Verse 4. But before they lay down, the men of the city, even the men of Sodom, compassed the house round, both old and young, all the people from every quarter. And they said unto Lot, and said to him, Where are those men that came into you tonight? Bring them out unto us that we may know them. And you know what that means. And Lot went out at the door unto them, and shut the door after him, and said, I pray you, brethren, don't do so wickedly. Behold, now I have two daughters, which have not known man. Let me, I pray you, bring them out unto you, and you do with them that is good in your eyes. Only unto these men do nothing, for therefore they came under the shadow of my roof. Now, of course, this account portrays gross evil, but what Lot offered with his two daughters also is totally alien to us. But that was how strong the customs of hospitality were. We learned from Diane Martinez the covenant of the doorway, and also Lot had fed them. Salt was used in the meal. Thereby, Lot promised, with that salt and with inviting them under his roof, the safety and protection of his house. And breaking that, and that covenant of salt, was worthy of death. So that explains what he did with his daughters. But Lot didn't know that his guests were angels. Surprise, surprise. Hallelujah, Sakatuya. Genesis 19:9. And they said, Stand back. And they said, This one fellow comes to sojourn, and he needs be a judge. Now we will deal worse with you than with them. And they pressed sore upon the man, even Lot, and came near to break the door. But the men put forth their hand and pulled Lot into the house to them and shut the door. And they smote the men that were at the door of the house with blindness. Wow, both small and great. So they wearied themselves to find the door. And the men said to Lot, Do you have any here besides son-in-law, your sons, your daughters? Whatever you have in the city, bring them out of this place, for we will destroy this place, because the cry of them is grown great before the face of the Lord, and the Lord has sent us to destroy it. Of course, we must understand this in the light of the Semitic idiom of permission. And Lot went out and spake unto his sons-in-law, which married his daughters, and said, Up, get you out of this place, for the Lord will destroy the city. But he seemed as one that mocked unto his sons-in-law. And then, when the dawn arose, at the crack of dawn, when the angel hastened Lot, saying, Rise, take your wife and your 2 daughters, which are here, lest you be consumed in the iniquity of the city. And while he lingered, the men laid hold upon his hand, and upon the hand of his wife, and upon the hand of his 2 daughters, the Lord being merciful unto him. And they brought him forth, and set him outside of the city. And it came to pass, when they had brought them forth abroad, that he said, Escape for your life. Look not behind you, neither stay thou at all in the plain. Escape to the mountain, lest thou be consumed. And Lot said, No, not so, my Lord. Behold, thy servant has found grace in thy sight, and thou hast magnified thy mercy, which thou showed unto me in saving my life. I can't escape to the mountains, lest some evil take me, and I die. Behold, here's a little city here that I can flee unto. It's just a little one. Oh, let me escape thither. Isn't it just a little one? And my soul shall live. And he said unto him, See, I've accepted thee concerning this thing also, that I will not overthrow this city, for the which thou hast spoken. Haste thee, escape thither, for I can't do anything till you be come thither. Therefore the name of the city was called Zor. It means little bitty place. And the sun was risen upon the earth as it peaked over the mountains, when Lot entered Zor, and the Lord rained upon Sodom and upon Gomorrah brimstone and fire from the Lord out of heaven. Wow. That was pretty vivid, but wait until you hear the archaeological evidence. There's been some disagreement regarding the location of Sodom and Gomorrah, whether they were by the northern end of the Dead Sea or the southern end. But the northern city of Tel al-Hammam fits the description. It and 5 nearby cities were destroyed by an asteroid exploding in mid-air. This was similar to the Tunguska event in Russia in 1908 that knocked down millions of trees. But this explosion was larger because of the high temperatures that were evident with melted brick, etc., that were left behind in those cities. I'm going to attach 3 PDFs, one of which is the complete scientific report on the findings. Here's a quote from one of them. It says, a large 672-gram melt rock was found in 2010 by S. Collins at Tal Mewis, about 8.5 kilometers south of Tal el-Hammam. Now they think Tal el-Hammam was Sodom. The melt rock is an agglomeration of 3 different lithologies, mineral compositions, that appear to have been slammed together while in a semi-melted plastic state. Melting of the entire mass continued long enough to coat the assemblage with a layer of glass. One of the mineral compositions, composed mostly of fused quartz granules, contains melted zirconium crystals with numerous tiny bubbles indicating boiling. Molten quartz boiled. Another mineral composition, composed mostly of brown sandstone, contains bubbles lined with brown colored glass. These features led research teams at NAU and NCSU to conclude that the melt rock was exposed to temperature profile of about 12,000 degrees centigrade for at least a few seconds. Folks, that's close to the temperature of the surface of the sun. Another account at the dig at Tel el-Hammam describes that every night the archaeologists would dig every day, and then every night the dew would condense on the freshly excavated ground, and in the morning everything would be covered with a layer of salt, which the dew had leached out overnight. That salt came from the explosion's impact on the Dead Sea, which has a high 30% salt content. And that spread salt for miles and made the ground around the area infertile for many years. Salt deposits under the ground and around the lake could also have become dislodged and even cast into the air. Now, I'm going to read the abstract from the scientific article. That's the summary at the beginning. It's titled, "A Tunguska-sized airburst destroyed Tal el-Hammam, a Middle Bronze Age city in the Jordan Valley near the Dead Sea." Quote, "We present evidence that in approximately 1650 BCE," now that's the wrong date, should be about 1950 BC, "a cosmic airburst destroyed Tal el-Hammam, a Middle Bronze Age city in the southern Jordan Valley, northeast of the Dead Sea. The proposed airburst was larger than the 1908 explosion over Tunguska, Russia, where a 50-meter wide bolide, that's a kind of meteorite, detonated with 1,000 more times energy than the Hiroshima atomic bomb. A city-wide 1.5 meter thick carbon and ash-rich destruction layer contains the peak concentrations of shocked quartz, that's a trait of meteor strikes, and also nuclear tests, melted pottery and mud bricks, diamond-like carbon soot, iron and silicon-rich spherules, calcium carbonate spherules from melted plaster, melted platinum, iridium, another marker of meteorites, nickel, gold, silver, zircon, chromite, and quartz. Heating experiments indicate temperatures at El Hammam exceeded 2,000 degrees centigrade. So the other place was at the center of the explosion. This was to the side. Amid city-side devastation, the airburst demolished 12 plus meters of the 4 to 5 story palace complex and the massive 4-meter thick mud brick rampart, while causing extreme disarticulation and skeletal fragmentation in nearby humans. They were literally blown apart. An airburst-related influx of salt produced hypersalinity and inhibited agriculture, caused a 300-year-long abandonment of 120 regional settlements within a 25-kilometer radius. Tal el-Hammam may be the second oldest city-town destroyed by a cosmic airburst impact after Abu Hurriya, Syria, which was another one older than that. Possibly the earliest site with an oral tradition that was written down, Genesis. Wow. I'll let the word speak for itself when it comes to any further commentary about those two cities. Genesis 19:25. It says, "And he, God, overthrew those cities, and all the plain, and all the inhabitants of the cities, and that which grew upon the ground. But his wife, Lot's wife, looked back from behind him, and she became a pillar of salt." That word overthrow is very descriptive. It's the Hebrew word hafak, to overturn, as in a plow, to plow under. Its first usage is Genesis 3:24, where the sword of fire whirled, hafak, around on every side. His wife looking back and becoming a pillar of salt could be that she stopped moving forward and was crushed by a falling block of salt. Verse 27, "And Abram got up early in the morning to the place where he stood before the Lord, and he looked toward Sodom and Gomorrah and toward all the land of the plain, and behold, and lo, The smoke of the country went up as the smoke of a furnace. It came to pass, when God destroyed the cities of the plain, that God remembered Abram, and sent Lot out of the midst of the overthrow, when he overthrew the cities in which Lot dwelt. And Lot went up out of Zoar, and dwelt in the mountains, and his 2 daughters with him. For he feared to dwell in Zoar, and he dwelt in a cave, he and his 2 daughters. And the firstborn said to the younger, Our father is old, and there's not a man in the earth to come in unto us after the manner of all the earth. Come, let us make our father drink wine, and we will lie with him, that we may preserve the seed of our father. And they made their father drink wine that night, and the firstborn went in and lay with her father. And he perceived not when she lay down, nor when she arose. Came to pass in the next day, the firstborn said to the younger, Behold, I lay yesternight with my father. Let's make him drink wine this night also, and you go in and lie with him, that we may preserve seed of our father. And they made their father drink wine again that night also, and the younger arose, lay with him, and he perceived not when she lay down nor when she arose. Thus were both the daughters of Lot with child by their father. And the firstborn bare a son, called his name Moab. The same is the father of the Moabites to this day. And the younger, she also bare a son, and called his name Ben-Ami. The same is the father of the children of Ammon unto this day. Wow! The 2 daughters had married men from Sodom. Whoa, Nelly. Somehow they thought what they did was logical. Well, and the hits keep coming. This is the final consequence of Abraham taking Lot with him. The Moabites and the Ammonites were thorns in the sides of Israel after that. Moab would not let Israel pass by to go into the promised land. Later in the Judges period, both Moab and Ammon attacked Israel and subjugated them. They were later defeated and Israel was freed. But then David conquered both Moab and Ammon, but they rebelled later. And even after that, they attacked Judah and Jehoshaphat, but were defeated again. But all along throughout that time, their idolatrous sex worship was a constant problem to the believers. All of these were consequences of that original compromise of bringing Lot with him. So the lesson is, if God tells you something, it's best to do what he says. Remember, he won't ask you to do something that he won't help you accomplish. So there is no need for compromise. So, wow. Let's get back to Genesis 20. To summarize, Sarah was still very beautiful at the age of 90. Wow. And the king of Gerar, that's the Gaza area, took her. But God appeared to him in a dream and told him to give her back. Chapter 21 records the birth of Isaac. So that apparently with the king of Gerar was yet another attempt to thwart God's plan for Abraham, because Sarah must have been pregnant when she was taken. God intervened again, and Ahimelech, that king, gave her back. And then he even made a treaty with Abraham. So the devil's attempt backfired again. Genesis 20, verse 14. Ahimelech took sheep and oxen and men servants and women servants and gave them to Abraham and restored to him Sarah his wife. And Abimelech said, Behold, my land is before thee. Dwell where it pleases you. So he was free to go wherever he wanted. And Sarah, he said, Behold, I have given thy brother 1,000 pieces of silver. Behold, he is to thee a covering of the eyes unto all that are with thee, and with all other. Thus she was reproved. That's a sort of a strange translation. Pillai straightens it out. He says it should be translated, quote, that I may be absolved before your eyes and all the people. Thus he made peace with her, unquote. So, verse 17, Abraham prayed unto God, and God healed Abimelech and his wife and his maidservants, and they bare children, for the Lord had fast closed up all the wombs of the house of Abimelech because of Sarah, Abram's wife. So, Genesis 21, verse 1. And the Lord visited Sarah as he had said, and the Lord did unto Sarah as he had spoken. For Sarah conceived and bare Abraham a son in his old age, at the set time of which God had spoken to him. And Abraham called the name of his son that was born unto him, whom Sarah bare unto him, Isaac. And Abraham circumcised his son Isaac, being 8 days old, as God had commanded him. And Abraham was 100 years old when his son Isaac was born unto him. And Sarah said, God made me to laugh, so that all that hear will laugh with me, because Isaac means laughter. And she said, who would have said to Abraham that Sarah should have given children suck? For I have borne him a son in his old age. And the child grew and was weaned. And Abraham made a great feast the same day that Isaac was weaned. Now, in that culture, they had breast milk until they were much older, even older than 5 years old in some cases. Because of the high infant mortality rate, the weaning of a child was a milestone in the ancient world. So this indeed was a great time and cause for rejoicing. Verse 9, Genesis 21:9. Sarah saw the son of Hagar, the Egyptian, which she had borne unto Abraham, mocking. Wherefore she said to Abraham, cast out this bondwoman and her son. For the son of this bondwoman shall not be heir with my son, even with Isaac. And that thing was very grievous. It's evil in the sight of Abraham, because Ishmael was his son too. And God said to Abraham, let not it be evil in your sight, because of the lad, because of thy bondwoman, and all that Sarah hath said unto thee, hearken to her voice, for in Isaac shall thy seed be called. Here we see again how Abraham greatly valued family. It was very evil in his sight. He did not want to go along with her wishes. But Sarah realized something that was only going to get worse, because if Ishmael was insolent enough to publicly disrespect Isaac on such a joyous occasion that was in his honor, what would stop him from doing much worse? He demonstrated he had no restraint. So Sarah saw it as a threat to Isaac's safety. After all, the devil had fought them so fiercely, even to get Isaac. Didn't want a Cain and Abel situation. So she wanted to banish Ishmael, so it could never be a threat. God told Abraham to follow her advice. At this point, we come to the passage in Genesis in which Abraham was told to offer Isaac, the son they'd worked so hard to have. I covered this in the One God of Original Christianity class in the light of James 1:13. God does not tempt. James 1:13, let no man say when he's tempted, I'm tempted of God, for God cannot be tempted with evil, neither tempts he any man. It's pretty clear. I know there are different opinions about this with Isaac, but I think one thing we can all agree upon is that since God does not tempt, instead of looking at it from a negative standpoint, we ought to think of it in a positive way, because this was a test, not a temptation. Look at Genesis 22. We'll start Genesis 22, verse 1. It came to pass after these things, that God did tempt. The word is nasa, which also means test Abraham. And said to him, Abraham, and he said, behold, here I am. Now, in the One God Original Christianity class, I covered the two Hebrew words, nasa, to test, assay, or prove, and bakan, to examine or test. These are similar. Girdlestone covers them in his book, Synonyms of the Old Testament. That's available for free download on archive.org. So you can see more about that there. The best way to see these is to do word studies. Then you get to digest stuff yourself instead of trying to understand somebody else's product. That's where the lexicons come up short, because if we use them alone, we won't get it. We need to take the time to do word studies in order to discover the connotations, which are the feelings or ideas that the word suggests, and they're specified by the context. By doing so, we'll see that these two words have both a positive and a negative connotation. Take a look at Psalm 26. Psalm 26, 2, please. Psalm 26, 2. Examine me, bakan, O Lord, and prove me, nasa. Try, seraph, refine me, my reins, my intentions, and my heart, my thoughts. Now see, this is positive. The psalmist is saying to God, test me, try me. The word try is interesting there because it's saraf and it's repeated. Saraf. That repetition is emphatic. So it means to thoroughly refine. In other words, fully purify. This is a positive expectation. So when evaluating whether the tempting or testing is positive or negative, one must take into account what the intentions are. We should not test or prove God with negative intent, but we should prove him with positive intent, as Romans 12:2 declares. Prove me now herewith, like Malachi says. Here's another example. Matthew 22, verse 35 through 38. One of them said to Jesus, who was a lawyer, asked him a question, tempting him, testing him, and saying, Master, which is the great commandment in the law? And Jesus said to him, Thou shalt love the Lord thy God with all thy heart, and with all thy soul, and with all thy mind. This is the first and great commandment. Now that was a test. He wasn't expecting Jesus to fail. He was just doing a test. Now, a negative use of the word tempt is like the one in Matthew 4, when Jesus was tempted of the devil, because the devil wanted him to fail. Of course, James chapter 1, verse 13, clarifies that the prohibition with God, it states that God cannot be tempted with evil. It says, quote unquote, with evil there. So that indicates the negative intention. Malachi says, prove me now herewith. Try me, test me. That's positive. So you see, God cannot be tempted with an evil intent. So I think that clears up the misunderstanding about tempting and testing. So now let's go back to Genesis 22. Because I know this is a difficult passage. There are several truths at work here. Primarily, God is good all the time. So why would he test Abraham in this way to offer his son Isaac? Now I know there are some who do not understand that God is good all the time. There are some who do not acknowledge the existence of the devil. There are some who think that God is so powerful, he controls everything. So everything that happens to us is from God, whether it's good or bad. And those people try to decipher the ups and downs of life, and all they can come up with is God is testing us by whatever calamity or sickness or disaster, and they don't know why. So they say God works in mysterious ways. Well, I say no. God told us how he works. He said so in his word. We're in a spiritual battle between good and evil, and the fight does not seem fair. because we can't seem to see spiritual things, only effects. But God's on our side, so we can understand this incident with Abraham and Isaac without that error. I think we can. So Genesis 2:22, he said, "Take now your son, your only son Isaac, whom you love, and get thee into the land of Moriah, and offer him there for a burnt offering upon one of the mountains which I will tell thee of." Abraham rose early in the morning and saddled his ass, took 2 of his young men with him, and Isaac his son, and clave the wood for the burnt offering, and rose up and went to the place which God had told him. And on the 3rd day Abraham lifted up his eyes, and saw the place afar off. That lifted up his eyes means he saw it with expectation. And Abraham said unto his young men, "Abide ye here with the ass, and I and the lad will go yonder and worship, and come again to you." So, see, he expected to come again, you see. Abraham took the wood of the burnt offering and laid it on Isaac his son, took the fire in his hand and a knife, and they both of them went together. And Isaac spake unto Abraham his father, and said, "My father." And he said, "Here I am, my son." He said, "Behold the fire and the wood, but where is the lamb for a burnt offering?" And Abraham said, "My son, God will provide himself a lamb for a burnt offering." So they went both of them together. And they came to the place which God had told him of. And Abraham built an altar, and laid the wood in order, and bound Isaac his son, and laid him on the altar upon the wood. And Abraham stretched forth his hand, and took the knife to slay his son. And the angel of the Lord called, whoa, wait a minute, called to him out of heaven, and said, "Abraham, Abraham." And he said, "Here am I." He said, "Lay not your hand upon the lad, neither do thou anything unto him. For now I know that thou reverencest God, seeing thou hast not withheld thy son, thine only son, from me." Well, of course, by this time, Abraham had learned all his lessons about compromise. And so when God told him to do something, he was on it. And this is an example. Abraham lifted up his eyes and looked, and behold, behind him there was a ram caught in a thicket by his horns. And Abraham went and took the ram and offered him up for a burnt offering in place of his son. And Abram called the name of that place Jehovah Jireh, as it is said to this day, "In the mount of the Lord it shall be seen." Rotherham translates that last phrase, "In the mount of the Lord will provision be made." Now I know that there are 2 different opinions about this incident. One opinion is Abraham misunderstood the term burnt offering, because there's 2 kinds of burnt offering. One is the burnt offering we burn with fire. The other kind of burnt offering is like in the book of Judges, when Jephthah said, "After I win this battle, Lord, if you help me, then when I get home, the first thing that I see coming out of my property, I'm going to offer as a burnt offering." Well, he expected one of his animals to be coming out. Well, when he got home, it was his daughter that came out. Now, he didn't burn his daughter. He dedicated her to temple service. So that's the second kind of burnt offering, to dedicate yourself, to dedicate oneself to God. That's one opinion. The other opinion is that Abraham did not misunderstand, that he actually did intend to kill and burn up Isaac. Now, from what we've learned so far, I'm going to be honest with you. In my thinking now, this could go either way. But I'm not going to tell you which way to think. I'm going to present the facts, let you mull about it, and you can let me know if you want. I mean, this is not the end of the world if we disagree on this, because if Abraham misunderstood, well, that's a kind of a test. Okay, I know that God loathed human sacrifice, and God doesn't tempt with evil, but there's the other side of this. If you look at Hebrews chapter 11. Hebrews chapter 11, verse 17. "By faith Abraham, when he was tried, offered up Isaac, And he that had received the promise offered up his only begotten son, of whom it was said that in Isaac shall thy seed be called, accounting that God was able to raise him up even from the dead, from whence also he received him in a figure. Now, I think that this received him in a figure is real interesting. Because where did God tell Abraham to go? It says he told him to go to Mount Moriah. Well, you know where Mount Moriah is? If you look at 2 Chronicles 3, verse 1, Mount Moriah is where the temple was going to be. All right? In that area, there's a number of mountains or hills in the Moriah range. Some people even think that's where Jesus was crucified, on Golgotha. That hill was one of the hills of the Mount Moriah range. So this is in a figure. We have a portend of Jesus being sacrificed. So, that's why I think even though some people say that God loathes human sacrifice, well, Jesus was a human sacrifice. I mean, it was the only one that was legit. And of course, God was testing Abraham to see what he would do. Now, God knew what Abraham would do by foreknowledge, but after that test, who knew? Well, Abraham also knew he passed the test, and Isaac knew that he passed the test. And also, Isaac got to experience God firsthand with the angel and the ram being found. So I think that really locked Isaac in. So like I said, it could go either way with this one. I mean, maybe there'll be some more information that someday will come out that will convince me 100% either way. But this was the test, and it was not with a negative intent, because that's not what God does. It was something to prove or refine, and there definitely was a benefit, because afterward God expressed the promise again, the covenant. Look at verse 15. And the angel of the Lord called to Abraham out of heaven the second time and said, By myself I have sworn, saith the Lord, for because thou hast done this thing, and hast not withheld thy son, thine only son, that in blessing I will bless thee, and in multiplying I will multiply thy seed as the stars of the heaven, and as the sand which is upon the seashore, and thy seed shall possess the gate of his enemies, and in thy seed shall all the nations of the earth be blessed, because thou hast obeyed my voice. Both Abraham and Isaac heard it. So true to form, the covenant language was announced again. Remember how we went through the traits of the covenants back then? And one of the steps was where it was deposited, and then it was periodically reread. This is one of those rereadings. Finally, Abraham and Sarah's love story is coming to a close. It covered 12 chapters in the Word, more than any other couple. And here in Genesis 23, Sarah was 107 and 20 years old. These were the years of the life of Sarah. So 127. And Sarah died in Kirjath Arba, the same as Hebron in the land of Canaan. And Abram came to mourn for Sarah and to weep for her. And the rest of chapter 23 records how he bought a plot for her burying place, and he buried her there. Abraham and Sarah started the Hebrew nation, parented the Christ line, became the patriarchs of 3 religions of the world, and will go down in history as the greatest love story ever told. Bless you.